Hi, I'm Margaret, founder of Inspired Ghost Tracking. I hope you had a Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a very scary Happy New Year.
Hey, this is Rob Gutro, author and medium on the Inspired Ghost Tracking team, wishing you and yours a very happy holiday and always be in good spirits all year long.
Hello, I'm Troy Cline from the Inspired Ghost Tracking, and I just wanted to wish you a very happy new year and to say, sometimes it's hard to make a good New Year's resolution, but I have one that I think would be awesome. And I think we should all just say to the universe, hey, I'm open to enhancing and finally using my gifts and learning what they are and using them to help humanity and for healing and for love. Have a great new year.
Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward.
Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast, a safe place to talk about your paranormal encounters. I'm your host, Kat Ward. Happy New Year, everyone. I can't believe this is the last episode of 2023. This year sure has flown by. Episode 112 actually gets released on December 31st, so I hope you decide to listen to this episode with others at your New Year's celebration. You can probably hear by my voice that I've been under the weather. I'm recuperating from COVID for a third time. It's been a couple of years now, so I guess I was due. So I hope you're all well. I wish you much love and prosperity in the new year. My guests are part of Inspired Ghost Tracking. I'm joined tonight by Margaret Perry Ehrlich, founder of the team, Troy Cline, space science outreach specialist and medium, and returning guest, Rob Gutro, meteorologist and pet medium. They talk about how they got involved in the paranormal, what their psychic gifts are, as well as a chilling ghost investigation at a private residence that reported paranormal activity. What they found was the result of a double murder with amazing confirmation of what happened and photographic proof of the ghosts that were left behind. Before we get to the show, if you'd like to be a guest, or if you'd like me to narrate your creepy or paranormal encounters, I'm looking for you. Yes, you. You can email me at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. And folks, I have listeners all over the world. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love for you to send me an email and tell me what part of the world you're listening from and what part of the paranormal you like the most. Is it ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, or something else? I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget, new episodes are released on the second and last Sunday of each month. You can find me on YouTube, Podbean, KPNL Digital Network, and any place you find fine podcasts. Whatever platform you listen on, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. It helps the show more than you know. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast.
Hello,
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I am so excited that this finally was able to, we were able to make it because, folks, 3 guests and a host, it's very difficult getting everyone scheduled to coincide, and it's just, it's been challenging.
Yes, it has. But you finally did it. The powers that be came together and stars aligned finally. So
Finally, yeah. So I thought we could start off with you introducing yourselves one by one, telling us how the paranormal started for you, and discuss how, if you have any, because I don't know if Margaret has any special abilities. I think you do. So maybe we could start with Margaret.
All right. So, hi, I'm Margaret. I started with the paranormal in 2008 when I started Inspired Ghost Tracking. My abilities, I am a little bit sensitive, but I'm not a medium. I'm the one that runs the show and gets our private investigations and stuff like that.
Nice. Troy, shall we go with you next?
Sure. My name's Troy Cline, and I have been, I come from a long line of spiritualists and people in my family that track back several, I guess, generations from the stories I've been told, which is really nice. And you just never know if those gifts and abilities will translate from one generation to the next, or they'll skip and hear all the different stories. But in this case, it seems that from my grandmother through my dad, and then to me, various abilities translated. And I think, to be honest with you, I think we all share different abilities and giftings. And it's what's really interesting is finding the one that is natural for you and feels comfortable for you, and then start practicing that and exercising that muscle. And then suddenly it starts growing. It can be extraordinary when it happens. And so I always knew that I was connected spiritually in some way, shape, or form. I could sense things, feel things. I could feel the energy of a room when I walked into it. And coming out of a place where your dad was an evangelical preacher growing up and you are gay made that really interesting.
Oh.
So I had to be very, very careful and try to stay one step ahead of everybody because of that church setting. And that actually probably forced me to exercise the giftings and abilities that I had a little bit more, because I was trying to stay a little step ahead of the curve, because that wasn't a very comfortable atmosphere to be in. There were a lot of wonderful things that happened in that atmosphere, but there were some terrible things as well for kids who are growing up in that environment, especially if they're LGBT plus Q kids. And so I have a real heart for that. But what ended up happening was I have a close tie with my family, and my dad, his abilities were described differently. They were described, and so were mine. They were described from a church vocabulary. And so they talked about gifts of the spirit, discernment. There was just different ways, words of knowledge. And that was very normal in my family. We operated in that. And then when I grew older and, I stepped outside of that particular church and started expanding my horizons into the universe. And what I felt I could take from that worked for me and what was true for me, and not dismiss all of it, but take what worked and then dismiss what didn't. I was able to exercise the abilities that I had, and different vocabulary terms came up, and the giftings that I had and started sharing with people called by different names. And I often could tell if there was a good or bad presence in the room, or if an energy walked in. And then later on in my life, and I won't go too deeply into it, but later on in my life, when I met Rob Gutro, and we were at work and we had lunch one day, and I had no idea that Rob was a medium or did any of the things that he did. And we just struck up a conversation. He told me about his books that he writes, and just a little bit about the paranormal, and all of my stories came out. And I started telling him stories about things that happened to me. And he said, Troy, I think it'd be a really good idea if you would just meet Margaret, come with me on some of these investigations that IGT does. And I was like, sure, that sounds really interesting to me. So the interesting story that really sold me about Rob was, while we were having lunch, I told him a story about my dog, which is in one of his books. I wrote a chapter for him in one of the books about my dog, Pete. And Rob said, don't be surprised if Pete shows up on your way home. And if he comes in some way to let you know and acknowledges, and you can acknowledge him, and he'll be there. So I'll be darned if for the first time in over 25 years, I was on my way home driving that day, and I smelled hay in my car. And I was like, that's odd, like I didn't see a hay truck anywhere. And then I sensed my dog, And I realized that he was a beagle, and he was an outdoor dog, and he slept in hay all the time. And when I cuddled and held him, he smelled of hay, always. And I knew it was Pete, and I could feel him in the car. And I suddenly realized all the grief I'd had about losing him, and he had been hit by a car.
Oh,
and
sorry.
And it was a tragic ending for him. He was about 12 years old when that happened. And I remember feeling guilty that I wasn't there. And all that time, and I never had another dog after that. And I didn't realize that that was why until Pete showed up. And then Pete let me know. He imparted to me. He was as happy as he could be. It was like nothing had happened. He had no anger. There was no guilt, no nothing. And he was just happy to see me. And I realized the only person carrying any of that remorse and guilt was me and not him. And I was able to let go of that. And it was a real life-changing moment for me. And I was able to embrace the idea of having additional pets after that. So I'm real thankful that Rob used his gift in that way to open the door. And then they invited me to go on my first investigation with them, which happened to be this double murder investigation we're going to talk about tonight. So that's me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure having you all.
Thank you.
And last and certainly not least, Rob,
I don't know
listeners,
how I can top that, Kat.
What's that?
I don't know how I can top that.
Oh,
He's
easily.
an amazing man and a very gifted medium. And Margaret is the manager of Inspired Ghost Tracking, and she had a paranormal experience herself when she was younger. It's in the book Case Files of Inspired Ghost Tracking, by the way. It's called The Yellow House. So she had her own ghost story. For people who don't know me, I consider myself a medium. I specialize in pets. We've talked about this before, of course. A pet medium because I love communicating with them. I joined Inspired Ghost Tracking in 2010, I believe, when I came to talk about my very first book, and then I never left. And I still haven't left, even though I'm living in another state. Still do all kinds of things together.
Yes, we do.
So I've written 10 books. I have another one on the way. Ghosts of Ireland on a Medium's Vacation. I think that may appeal to some of you. So, but yeah. So the very first case that Troy and I worked together on was what we came to call the double murder ghost investigation. And Margaret is the one that called us. Of course, she does all the questionnaires and everything else, and make sure that these investigations are legitimate. So she goes through a very lengthy process. And when Troy and I got the request, she said, "I'll give you the address an hour before you have to be there, and I'm not going to tell you where it is." And that's it. So
that was the whole story.
Yeah.
And so when they told me that, like, we'll tell you just before an hour before, just be ready. It'll be within 45 minutes of your house. I'm like, all right. And so I looked it up, and I was able to stop by a friend of mine's house, a couple friends on the way. And I said, I'm headed over to this area. It's not far from where you live. And I was nervous. I had never done anything like this. Like, I'd never gone on an investigation before. So they were trying to lighten it up, and they were teasing me and telling me I should dress up like Oda Mae Brown from Ghost, walk in and just start yelling, scare everybody. I was laughing so hard by the time I drove up. I was still cracking up in tears from just the craziness of that idea. And I didn't know. And I told Rob and Margaret this later. Like, I wasn't confident yet in my abilities in this area on an investigation, or if I would feel anything or sense anything. And I've always been really humble about that. I think that's just an important key part of people who are gifted in various ways. I think when people become arrogant about what they do, it affects it in a negative way. And I think it can probably dissipate if I ever became that way. So it's real important that we really stay honorable and have a lot of integrity about what we do and why we do it, and that we're there to help. For me, if I go to a place just to see if there's a ghost and have like this kind of like a roadshow kind of experience, I feel guilty. I don't feel right about it, and it shuts a lot of my abilities down. But when I'm there with other people who are sincere and real, it amplifies. what we're able to do. So I got there and we walked in and I just realized how serious this was, and the whole mood for me instantly changed, and we walked on into it. So I just want to interject that you walk into these experiences sometimes not knowing what you're getting into, but if you're with the right people, which thank God I was in this case, it's going to be okay.
I have to crack a little joke. When you mentioned that you didn't find out till about an hour before going, I pictured Margaret putting black hoods on you until you got there. Then you take the hoods off.
Don't put it past her.
Oh.
Yeah, I am very hush-hush with the investigations. They don't find anything out except the address an hour before, so that they can't do any investigating on their own or So what they come up with, their feelings, are their true feelings, because they don't know anything about it.
I prefer that method as well. Whenever the team that I'm with go on investigations, I want to know as little as possible.
Yep.
So
with this investigation, it was one of those, I didn't have to do a whole lot of interviewing, because it happened to be my niece who called me. And she says, can y'all come out? This is what's going on. And it was mainly happening with her youngest son, who was like 3 years old. And he kept telling her, there's a monster in my room. And that's all he could tell her, was there was a monster. There was a monster. So I did a little bit of research in it. I found out what was going on, or what happened in the house. And I pulled everybody in. And that's when Rob and Troy came into the picture, and we went over there to see what they could find.
So one of the interesting parts of this, Kat, is that they didn't own the house; they were renting it.
Okay.
So they didn't have a knowledge of the past history.
But they did have knowledge of this.
Oh, they did have knowledge of that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So when I went to get the police report, I found out that in order for me to get the police report, the whole police report, because it was in the archives, it would have cost me $300 to get it.
Ouch.
And I said, you know what? I do this for free. I'm not paying that kind of money for it. So I called my niece and I told her about it. She says, oh, well, we got enough of it for you to look at. And she sent me what she had. And she had quite a bit of it. I mean, she had, all the wording of it. So I guess what they were going to get me was everything. And I didn't need to see the gruesome pictures and all that. I mean, you could just imagine it. But so I got the whole police report, or that part of it, from her. Yeah, they'd already researched, Rob. My work was easy.
See how many things she keeps secret, Kat?
I see that.
even 12 years later.
Yeah.
So it is possible that you would have been hooded to go on these investigations.
I might try that once, Troy.
Uh-oh. I'm sorry. Did I start something? Wow. So yeah, do tell. So you showed up at the house, and then walk us through everything.
So Margaret wanted us to go inside, but Troy and I were both standing together. And by the way, Troy and I feed off each other. We really complement each other, and we often confirm things for each other.
That's right.
So she said, come on inside. And we both looked at each other and we said, no, we want to go outside first. So that led Troy to one part of the house first.
Why do you think you had the feeling to look outside first?
That's a good question, because again, this was the first time I had ever done anything like this. And so when I got there and walked up and I met the team for the first time. And Margaret divvied out responsibilities to people, which was all new to me. And she said, Troy, we're going to send this person who's going to take notes. We're sending this person with you who will record everything you say. And I was suddenly like, oh my God, this is going to be hilarious because they're going to record all the nonsense I probably will say and drum up and come out. And I'll come up with God knows what. And then they'll tell me a parakeet flew through the house and it scared them. And I'll come up with all this other stuff. But I couldn't have been any more wrong, because as soon as I walked onto the grounds and met Rob and the team, that feeling, that telltale feeling that I have in my gut and in my chest hit me. And I knew it was serious. And I was had no idea what was going to happen. So Rob and Margaret, we talked, and they said, what would you all like to do first? And I looked over at Rob and I said, I really feel like we need to do the circumference and periphery of the house right now. It was a feeling. It was like, I think there's some information on the outside we're going to gather. And Rob said, I couldn't agree with you more. I was going to say the same thing. And I was like, okay, we're connecting already. This is pretty cool. Yeah. And so Rob went one way and I went the other. And I went around to the left side of the house, and I was kind of looking at the house, just seeing what would happen, and thought I would take a nice stroll and get an idea of what it was before we went inside. And as soon as I got to the left side of the house, to where there was an old carport there, that it was all closed in, and there was a white door there next to where the carport had been. And I just stopped, and in my spirit mind, I could just see somebody frantically coming in and out of that door, just grabbing the handle, shutting it, closing it, and all this horrible and really terrifying nervous energy was on it. So I started to just describe what I was seeing. And when I say I'm seeing, it's different for everybody. For me, I sense and feel empathically most of what I get. I mean, I actually feel it in me as if it's my own. And it's like having memories that aren't yours, but you feel every bit of it. You even feel the emotion of it. And I start describing that, and then my imagination, and what I call my spirit mind, and your imagination is a powerful, wonderful tool when you know how to use it and harness it, started putting together images and ideas of what it was, frantically trying to figure out how to give me a visualization of what I was feeling and what I was picking up in spirit. And that's how it's always been with me. And you can get really good at it to the point where it will put together an accurate image that can be verified through portraits and pictures and images later on. And it's just a wonderful way to use that tool. So that was all going 100 miles an hour. So I started talking about that, and nobody was giving me any information or anything. I was getting no help. And so I just said, okay, well, I'm just going to keep on going. But I couldn't let that go. And I walked on around to the back side of the house, and at that point, I saw Rob in the back of the yard. You were meandering further out into the yard. You want to talk about that, Rob?
One quick note that Rhonda happened to be near Troy when he was at the door, and there was an electrical box, and she used the K2 meter to see if the electrical box was giving off any electromagnetic energy. Because that will also make people hallucinate or feel like somebody's behind them.
That's right.
And it wasn't. So Rhonda debunked that. So what the feelings that Troy experienced were genuine. So in the back left side of the house, there was a dog that was buried back there, and and there was a ghost attached to it, but was not connected to the house whatsoever. As we rendezvoused and walked to the other side of the house, then Troy sensed something else on the other side of the house. There was a darkness there.
I remember looking at as we were in the back of the house. I looked and I could just sense, and I really thought my mind was just playing tricks on me, but there was no one there telling me to stop. So everything was full on, and I didn't realize yet at that point about Rob's abilities and giftings, and that part of what I can do is when I'm around other people who are gifted, it amplifies what I can do.
Yep.
And which is interesting. Not everybody has that experience, but it's certainly true for me, and I think for Rob as well. And so I looked and I could sense and see, and my mind was putting together images of blood splatter and across through the kitchen or in that area of the house. It was just odd. And I described it a little bit. Then we walked around to the far right-hand side of the house, which happened to be on the other master bedroom. There was a bedroom downstairs, I think, where the kid had felt he saw the monster, and then there was another room upstairs. And I remember feeling a sense of hopelessness of a woman on the other side of that wall with a feeling like I am going to die. Like I'm not going to survive this. And it was a crying, weeping hope. I mean, I feel the chills of it right now when I talk about it. And I tried to describe that. And sometimes when you're doing that, you're feeling the emotion so deeply, you will cry just like that victim. Like you have to try to control yourself and step away from it for a little bit. And so we described that, and then we all met back up at the front of the house before we went inside.
I can't imagine feelings, intense feelings like that. Like I don't call myself a medium. I call myself more sensitive because it's not anything that I can really control. And I have sensed things like that. But how do you continue investigating when you've already started right from the beginning these strong emotions that you're feeling that you know they're not yours? How do you continue doing that?
Well, Margaret was in charge, so we knew that we had to.
No, disappoint me now.
Margaret's really good at watching the team, and she will sometimes, if she sees somebody getting just too much and overwhelmed, she'll stop, and we'll do some Reiki healing. We'll do anything that it takes to shake that off, because you can get drawn too far into it, and then you're really no earthly good anymore because you're just too pulled into it, and it can be harmful if you go too far. And so we're all very mindful of each other and actually do stop, and we shake off the feeling. We give each other light and energy. We do whatever we need to do in the moment so we can continue. And in that case, I before I go on any investigation and when I leave, all the way in the car, depending on the investigation, I'm in meditation, and I'm protecting myself and giving myself as much light and energy as I can, and asking for protection through the entire thing. And I'm also asking that nothing can attach, and I can't bring anything home, or on my car or any object that I possess, because things can attach to that unknowingly, and you bring things home, and weeks later, everybody in your house will get sick, or everybody's angry, or there are all these unexplained things going on, and it's because you carried an attachment. So we're really, really mindful of that, and we don't want that happening. But I was able to move around to the front. I shook off the feeling, so to speak, and then Rob and I just will never forget the serious look in Rob's eyes. And then we said, "Are we ready to go in?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Do you want to go up or down?" And I said, "I'm feeling we need to go." It was a split level house.
Yeah, I needed to go down.
Yeah. So that's what we did.
So when I remember walking in there, and we went down to the basement, which was a finished basement, Kat. It was a full apartment down in the basement. It looked like an apartment. And and on the left-hand side, what used to be the carport or whatever was made into a daycare room. Now, when I walked through, in order to get to the daycare room, you had to walk through a small furnace area, and I experienced serious vertigo in there, and I think Troy, you did too.
Oh my God! It was Rob. When you spoke up, I was never so relieved, because it was like walking into a bubble of absolute fear and pain. It was that intense.
It felt like walking through a pool.
It did.
Like a pool of water. Mm-hmm. It was, that's how much energy was in there. And we actually learned that furnace room was key to the events that happened, but I'm not going to tell you what they are yet. I'm going to make them wait. So when we got in that daycare room, Rhonda was there. Rhonda is one of the senior investigators, and she maintains like the digital recorders and the digital thermometer and the K2 meter. And we noticed in the back an actual temperature drop. So one of the things that I've figured out as a scientist is that Ghosts, when they try to manifest, they will absorb the energy of motion of air molecules. And when they do that, they slow them down. And fast-moving molecules of air are warm air, and slower-moving molecules of air are cool air. So wherever they try to appear, there's a cold spot. So we didn't really know that we were in the presence of a ghost right then, but we were.
I have to say, I heard you on Tommy Cullum's show not too long ago, and that's the first time I've ever heard anybody explain it that way. And I was so excited when I was like, yes, somebody finally explains why that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in that in the room that Rob's talking about, we were in there for a little while, and I remember that was the first I started. Well, it was the second. It was a female energy that we felt when we got to the bottom of the stairs, and then again another female energy in the next room over. And I'm trying not to give anything away, Rob. I'm following your lead on it. But in that second room, I remember seeing the hopelessness of a young woman that looked like she was in her early 20s. She had long, like brown hair. And she looked like, in that case, she was in a nightgown, but she was just pleading for her life. And she was asking for help, and I couldn't figure out what she needed. I couldn't hear what she was saying. And I remember that I described at that point that she was afraid of a man that was standing in front of her, and that in the vision of this, there was another older man that I began to describe that was connected in some way. And I was trying to describe him. I remember talking about his hair and all of that. So none of this was making any sense to me. And I was asking, Rob and I were asking about the age, like how old is male, female, what's the age, and all of that. And what I was describing didn't fit the description Rob was having.
So you're probably second guessing yourself too.
Yeah, well, you have to. And if you don't, because you keep going with it and you see where it leads, but it's really important to hold on to what you're feeling and what you've got, because sooner or later these clues and puzzle pieces do come together. And I've learned that over the time, but at that moment it was scattered, and maybe Rob can explain why.
Well, Troy was sensing a woman in her 20s or 30s, and I was talking to a woman in her 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
And I thought, when we compared notes, Kat, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense. So we tried to figure out who the man was. And as it turned out, the man was just a projection from them. It wasn't really a ghost, a male ghost, right? Mm-hmm. So they were just projecting the image of a man to try and give us a message, which we later figured out. But we thought the first thing that Troy and I thought was, wow, this was a domestic violence episode where probably a husband murdered his wife, or a man murdered his girlfriend, or something like that. But then when we got the two different ages, we really had to stop for a minute and think, what in the world is happening here? Troy, you went into that is that when you went into the bedroom downstairs and encountered that?
Yeah. So, but
the other one?
I think as we first walked down, and I think you're deliberately skipping the one part. Is that right, Rob? Until later? Okay. So we walked first down the stairs and went through the bubble Rob described that was in sort of a laundry room area.
Yeah.
I remember looking over and feeling the sense, and I said it out loud. I was getting ready to say it, and then Rob stopped, and we were both covered in chills. We were overwhelmed. And Rob asked Margaret to shut the equipment off, stop everything. He had to say something that was really sensitive. He didn't want to scare the family. I was never so relieved when he said that, and I just lit up because I'm like, oh my God, I've got the same thing. And Rob described what he was feeling, and I
will never do that again.
Thank you. Yeah,
turn everything off, you mean?
Yeah, I will never do it again.
Why is that? We'll get back to that in a sec, Troy. Why is that?
We'll get back to that. But I'll say this one part is what I sensed was somebody getting just violently backhanded, and I said, bitch slap. And that was it. And then Rob went on with the rest of it, and you got the full details of this particular ghost that he was reliving. And Rob, can you describe what you were feeling in that room?
Well, I think Margaret wants to jump in and tell you why she will never listen to me again.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell you.
Well, that alone, what Troy said, is very much part of the case. And now we don't have it on recording because I turned the recorders off because they asked me to. So we all got to learn about it. And it was a very valuable lesson that it'll never happen again. Them recorders stay on no matter what. We might not share it with the clients, but we have it.
Yeah.
You know, just tonight listening to us talk about this again, I really think what happened at that moment was I was brand new to it. And I think I was psychically, Rob, projecting to you my hesitancy in saying anything because it was too overwhelming. I'd never experienced something that violent that quickly. And I wasn't confident enough yet. This was 10 years ago or however long ago. And in this walk that I don't know that I would have said anything right away. And it was key. So you asking for that to be turned off and seeing what you did opened the door for me to feel comfortable. And I agree with you, Margaret. But I think that's why that. And then from then on, we never ever turned anything off again.
Nope.
Yeah, so one of the younger woman actually shared images of what happened. She said she was beaten on the head. She was sexually molested.
Yeah.
She was shot. Basically, she was tortured, really. And these images that she was conveying to me were so horrific. That's why I asked Margaret to turn it off. I was thinking, oh my gosh, if she plays this for the family and the kids are there, holy cow. This is horrendous. And it was very traumatic for me because I met a lot of ghosts. But never a brutal murder like this.
This was bad. This was scary. Yeah. You could feel it. That's the thing. It was terrifying. So we walked through that room, and you were asking me earlier, Rob, about did I go into the other room, and so I walked through what was a downstairs kind of living room apartment area. And I remember looking over, there was a fireplace and there were utensils over by the fireplace. And I remember looking over there expecting to see blood on one of them. And I just like, how could this be this violent all over the place? I must be dreaming, how could this be this bad? And I remember that and I marked it down. I was like, there's something about the fireplace, poker, tool, that thing. And then I went into the other bedroom, which turned out to be, there was a master bedroom or a king-size bed or something in there. Yeah. And then the children's room off to the side where the baby apparently had been, or the young kid, and had been seeing what they thought was a monster. And as Rob and I were in there, Rob and Margaret had gone into the children's room, and we were sensing the woman, I think the younger woman. And then I stood right at the foot of the bed, and in one spot, and I remember, and I get chills again, I remember standing there feeling like I'm going to die. There's nothing I can do. I can't escape. It's hopelessness. I know what's happening. I'm not going to survive this. And it was a weeping feeling. It was overwhelming. And I later learned from the family that lived there, that were renting, that, and I'm not sure entirely how this all fit, but there was carpet where I was standing now. And they said that they were told that there had been a blood stain from somebody who was hurt or whatever that was on the floor right there where I was standing, but they couldn't get it up and the carpet was over it, so there was no way to see it anymore. It was covered up. And that broke my heart because I could just feel, can you imagine? And so I was sharing all of that and saying it. And again, at the same time, Margaret hasn't divulged anything. So again, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to find out there was a ghost bird that went through the house and we've made all this stuff. That really was going through, but it was, at the same time, it was so real that, I couldn't dismiss what was happening.
And my niece was complaining that somebody was watching her while she was sleeping. So she knew there was somebody down at the foot of the bed.
And it was her. It was the young woman.
Yeah.
And Rob, at what point did we figure out it was two different women?
So I asked the woman that I was talking to, the older woman, to give me some information about her. And she showed me that she was working, chopping up vegetables and serving people. And Margaret, I think that you learned that she managed a bar or something?
She owned a bar.
She owned a bar. So that's how that came to come together, that that's who the person was. But when we were upstairs, this older woman also made me feel like I was being pushed down the stairs, and suffered trauma on the head as I was being pushed down the stairs. So that was another clue as to who this was. And I think that Margaret had all this information too, so which she was keeping to herself, until we got to the end. But so that's how I figured out what her identity was, because she clued me in as to what she did for a living. One of the other interesting parts of this is that there were IGT members in there that were taking pictures. Now, Margaret, were the photographers there before we got there, or
no?
After we got there?
We went in after you, and we did the investigation.
So in that furnace room that we talked about, where we felt that vertigo, Cat, one of the photographers captured a picture of an orb. Now, an orb is the most simple form a ghost or a spirit can take until they get enough energy to be bigger, true form or whatever. So my husband Tom and I were home looking at these pictures, and we blew it up. And in the top part of that picture of the orb, there was a face, clearly a face of a woman. And it's in my book. You can see it right here as I show you on video. You can see the eye, and the nose and so forth. So that freaked me out even more. I mean, this was after the fact, after the investigation, that we actually found photographic proof of one of the women in there.
Oh, after looking at the photo, were you still picking up emotions and images?
Well, this was like a couple of days later. Yeah. So, no, I was still I was suffering something like PTSD after going through this. Really, it was emotionally traumatic for me. It's like being murdered, but you're still living.
Yeah.
So after they were done, going over the house and picking up all their feelings and all that, I disclosed to them what all was happening, and explained to them why there was two women. So the older woman owned the house. The younger woman was her daughter-in-law who came over. She rented the downstairs to this guy who evidently was a drug addict and all. And that day he was high on drugs, and he got mad with them for whatever reason. It never said why. He slapped the older woman around from the upstairs. He slapped her down and got her downstairs. He killed and raped he didn't kill her at that point, but he beat the younger one and raped her with the gun. And then he was dragging their bodies while they were still alive out through that laundry room, through the kids' room that was the carport, and putting them in the trunk of her car. And he drove the car off to an apartment project down the road from their house. A couple of days later, after the husband of the younger girl reported them missing, the cops finally got a report from someone that there was an abandoned car and what looked like blood coming out of the trunk.
Oh, wow.
So they bled to death in the trunk of their own car. Yep, it was a very big case. And the guy they did catch him, and I think he had 3 lifetime sentences.
Wow. So he's not getting out.
No.
Nope.
And the door.
Of course, I found out that I knew his sister, and I talked to her about it, and they're still claiming his innocence as of today.
Really?
Yep. All these years later, they're still claiming his innocence.
Well, you never really want to believe that a family member is capable of something like that.
Right. I mean, his shoes had blood on them, everything. They had all the proof that they needed with it.
Drugs, right? So he may not even actually have any recollection of it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing was the franticness of somewhere in the midst of all this, he knew he needed to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So he was aware enough to do that. And that's the part where he was frantically going in and out of that door. And I believe he might have wrapped one of them in a carpet. Is that right? To drag them out?
I don't remember. I'd have to, now that part of it, the details I can't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and find the police report and all that. You're going back way too many years for me on that.
Yeah.
12 years, Margaret.
Do what?
It was 12 years ago.
Wow.
Yes, I know.
Now, do you know if he ever remembered what he did and if he felt any remorse or anything? Did that ever come out?
It never came out. And the one thing that we all have an issue with is that we have always gone and cleared the house of whatever was there, or tried to clear the house. We never got a chance to go back into this house. My niece moved out, so we never got another chance to go back in.
Oh, wow.
So this was one of those that got away from us.
And the only saving grace of that is maybe one day we will, and we can go check and see if the ghosts are still there. But I've also had experiences where once the story has been told, the ghost hasn't been able to connect with people who can hear them. That's enough, and they cross over and they leave out. My hope.
Well, there was somebody, and I don't remember, and it was the other night when we were all at our last meeting. There was somebody that told me that they knew someone who lived across the street from that place.
Mm-hmm.
And that they said that the people that live there now do not have any problems.
Oh, good. Okay.
So maybe it did,
Or maybe they just haven't told anyone.
Maybe too,
Because there are a lot of people out there that'll have experiences and they'll just keep it to themselves because they think this isn't really happening.
Right.
But I'd like to believe that they did cross.
I would
Me too.
go there and see. Even Rob, if we could just drive by and see what we feel.
You read my mind. I was going to say that.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Why not judge something remotely? We've talked about that.
We could. We have done that.
I know it.
I was just thinking of you just driving by as I drive by psychics.
I know. Whole new series.
Yeah.
So I just want to interject that I think what I sensed was that the reason they stayed behind, they didn't cross over after they died, was that, number one, they died there, and ghosts will often stay where they died or lived or, visited. But number two, they came back as earthbound ghosts because they wanted to protect others in the house from this murderer. That's the feeling that I got when I was there.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And that's why they didn't cross over. And it was a big regret that we weren't able to go back and cross them over. Every time I tell the story, I still think of them. And it's very sad. Yeah.
At that point, though, this was so new for both of us with this group. The ability and the idea and the knowledge of how to cross people over and opening portals and what we've learned to do over the years. I hadn't done that yet, I don't think.
No, I hadn't either.
And I think the first time we did that was at that meeting where Margaret had us go.
Yeah.
There's a story there too. Let me tell you.
Yeah, that's another story, Kat. Crossing a ghost over in the ladies' room.
Oh no!
Yeah. But that's where I learned we could do it, and we've been doing that. Not going into ladies' bathrooms, but crossing them over.
Because, Kat, when you gotta go, you gotta
go. True. Yeah. So, Troy, since that was your very first investigation, correct?
Yeah.
And because all those feelings and images, how did you feel about that, your very first investigation, and what made you decide to keep going?
It was really overwhelming, especially when the big reveal happened and Margaret told us how accurate all of that was. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, this is these things that we've been feeling and talking about, I think that was probably the first time in my life where this became very real to me. That was a big pivotal moment in my life. I was like, there's more to this than I even gave it credit for, because this all, and I knew that I knew nothing about this when I went in there. I mean, nothing at all, and had no idea what to expect. So when I left, my mind was just reeling, and I realized that the person who did this was still alive, and that the investigation, there was more to it, and I had been talking about other people that I'd seen, or another person involved, and that scared me. I was like, that's when I talked to Margaret. Margaret shared with me the rules of the investigations and what we share and what we don't share and all that good stuff. And I actually realized that when you do investigations, you do put yourself at risk a little bit, because especially if it's an open investigation and you're starting to say things about people who are involved, that scared me. And I realized how serious it was, and everything was fine. I mean, we didn't divulge and go any further, and anything that needed to be shared, we shared with the right people, and anything else that we found that we needed to do, but or say. But that's when I learned how very, very, very serious this was. And so it took me several days to kind of shake it off. And I realized of not only just shaking it off, but staying in serious spirit meditation and prayer and covering and making sure that you don't have an attachment. Because there was a time in my life, it was after that, and I'm not sure when it happened, but I had an attachment and I didn't know I had one. And the reason how I found out about it is I was visiting my sister. I felt like I needed to go to her house and then go through a ceremony with her in her church. And I didn't know why I felt that way. And I'd never felt this way before. And I just thought, I'm going to do this. And so I went, and, we did meditation and prayer and all of it. But when I got to her house, I got out of the car, and they had this beautiful border collie named Oreo. And everyone liked my border collie. And Oreo ran up to and licks, and didn't know a stranger. And this dog, and I love dogs, and when this dog came up to me, he recoiled and growled. And when I went to try to calm him down, he ran for me and hid under the porch and wouldn't come out. And they were like, somebody must have kicked him. You must look like that person. They'd never seen that happen. So it kind of freaked me out. I didn't know why. I had no idea. And then we went through the ritual and prayer with my family later on that night. And then as soon as at another location, when we came back, and I got out of the car, Oreo came up, and I was expecting to be terrified of me, came right up to me and laid down on my leg. Aww. And just was like, I'm really sorry, you're okay now. But so thing was whatever the attachment was that I didn't know was there. And I realized then, I'm like, every single time I go on an investigation, before, during, and after, Margaret and Rob see me do it all the time. I will not leave circle and making sure we're protected, and there are all disconnections before we leave. And that's really helpful, and it answers your question. Now when I go on investigations, when you shake it off and you sever the energy, you intentionally sever the energy, because and don't take it with you. It's not for you to keep. And that's one of the things I keep telling myself is like a medium and all the different things that we do. I feel honored that I can be in a place where I can experience something with the family and be of help and to the intensity that we can at times. But I know that that is only because that energy is flowing through us to give to these people to help them in their situation or to help these spirits or ghosts and help the family that's in need. And then, but it's not for me to keep. If I hold on to it, that's selfish. There is no reason for me to hold on to that. And so I really do, I've learned to let it go in and go on out and let it be for what it's worth, is what I say. I'll tell people when I talk to them, they ask me if there's anybody around them or if I see their dad or any of that stuff. And sometimes yes, sometimes no, but I'll say when I sense it, I'll just say for what it's worth, this is what I see. This is what I feel. And I let it go. And that works for me.
And getting back to that border collie, it's just amazing how animals can see and sense all these things, and it just amazes me every time.
It really does. And we're talking to an expert down there, Rob, who.
Yep. Margaret, did you share any of the investigation with the authorities?
No, I didn't. I just, again, we're investigators. We're, I feel like we're crossing paths if we go that route because, number one, our mediums are the ones that sense this. And then you're crossing the lines with that too. So we kept it to ourselves really and shared it with the family. Mm-hmm. But Kat, you would ask something about how we, having those feelings, how we clear ourselves or, I had learned through, I've done Reiki and all, and I've done the healings and all. So I've learned a few things, one of which is you hug a tree. Mm-hmm. And you don't physically go up and, hug it, but just touching a tree or a bush. Yep. They're grounded, they're rooted. So everything, all the bad comes out of you, all the bad energy will come out of you and get put back down into Mother Earth and all. And that helps with us. The other one that I tell them all or bring with me is chocolate. Yeah. Chocolate is a grounder. And for all of us that love the chocolate, that just gives you one more reason to eat it.
So I'm grounding myself more often than I realize. No.
Yes,
I love chocolate.
So it is, and it's a very good grounder for you.
So it raises your endorphin level scientifically. So it makes you feel good, and that's why positive energy will purge the negative energy. So there's the science behind it.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Scientist, let us have our fun with the chocolate.
I need a Hershey bar.
I am bringing chocolate with me next time we investigate.
Yeah.
And I used to do it all the time.
I actually, after several investigations, I would look for a Wendy's and get a Wendy's chocolate frosty.
There you go. See, I mean, so there's a lot of ways that we get rid of it. And a lot of times we go out to eat afterwards. So with that, we'll get, like you said, we'll go to Wendy's, a frosty, something.
That's really important, Margaret, to do, and we don't always get to do that, but when we have debriefed after an investigation like that, it does help to align our energy, because I know that I did a lot of work with different indigenous groups in my life and career in different places and lived on the Navajo reservation for a while as a teacher, like in my early years. And so I gained some knowledge of the elders and the different ceremonies and their ways of knowing, and it's just such a beautiful, wonderful various cultures that exist in this country still that are very vibrant. And they'll say that after you've had a strong experience and a paranormal or spiritual experience, they don't just throw you back in your family and tell you to go home. There's a period of time where you actually are isolated in some tribes, and you have time to come back down, and to ground yourself again. And there's a transition time, and they're very serious about it because it can be damaging for for you just to throw yourself back into normal life right after you've had an experience like that. So we have intuitively, I think, often done this and taken time to do it. And when I come home from these, if it's been intense, my husband is like, don't bring anything home, don't. And I'll literally be by myself for a little while. I'll tell him a little bit about it, but then I just go off and I'll either, relax, take a bath, do whatever it is I need to do. And until I feel like I'm back to Troy again, because you really do go into a zone without even realizing. And one of the things that happens is people will come up to me later in some of these investigations and they'll ask me questions a week later, 2 weeks later. And I swear, I look at them and I just clueless. I don't remember saying some of that stuff. I don't remember.
Oh, wow.
Details. It's like trying to remember a dream.
Yeah.
It is exactly like that. It doesn't always happen, but like this particular investigation being the first one, as intense it was, I remember everything about it. But there are often times where it just goes, it evaporates. So I have to either write it down or we talk about it several times and then it keeps it in your long-term memory.
I think, too, like when I was younger and I used to like to watch a lot of horror movies, I would watch a comedy afterwards just to change the energy and the mood.
Yeah. It's a good thing to do. It makes sense.
So one thing I want to mention is that because I have always been tasked with writing the reports for every investigation, it's very easy for me to keep remembering the details because I write them down and I edit it and over again, and I share it with Margaret and Troy and the other investigators who are on the case to get their corrections and so forth.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found helpful after an investigation was that Troy and we lived in different places, so we would call each other on the phone and we would discuss things and we would work through things and get through some anxiety that we had left over from whatever it was, and make sure that we were both at a good level by the time we got off the phone. Mm-hmm. So that was very helpful.
Kind of like talking each other down.
Yeah. And brief, like really laying it to rest, so to speak, just putting it down and putting some finality on it and all of it. And it reminds me, even on the way, I have a notepad that I keep in the front seat of my car because sometimes you'll get premonitions and feelings days ahead of the investigation.
Yep.
And you write them down. But on your way, sometimes in the car, it really starts coming. And I remember a couple times I just couldn't wait for the next red light because I would scribble down an image or scribble down some notes and then keep it with me. And what I started doing was keeping this little notepad with me, close to me. I didn't share it. I didn't get there and say, hey, look what I wrote. I kept it with me so that things could be validated for me. And when I saw that thing or I was able to validate it, I knew I was on track. Once it was a Ouija board, once it was a tombstone, and all of these things ended up being verified once I was at the location that we went to.
And once it was a piece of jewelry. Yeah. So all of those, by the way, all of those cases that he's talking about are in the case files of Inspired Ghost Tracking. Book 1, by the way, I will be writing a book 2 because we have so many other awesome cases. And I just want to make an observation that we couldn't have done this without Margaret's guidance.
Right.
Margaret is the foundation of this, and she's brought all of these people from different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Troy came back from an education background and a science background. I'm a meteorologist. My husband Tom is an architect, and he was there, and he would debunk building noises and so forth.
But that comes in handy.
Yeah, so everybody came from different backgrounds, and it takes a really special person like Margaret to bring all of these people together to want to change the world for the better and heal not only the living, but heal the dead and cross them over. And it also takes a very special person like Troy, who is extremely sensitive and comes from a religious background, that he was the one that actually leads all of the crossings for the group. And if it wasn't for him, it would have been a lot harder for us to cross people over. So everybody has their own unique talent. And I just wanted to shout out to both of them because they're both such dear friends to me. They're like family. And I'm so grateful to both of them.
Oh, we feel the same way about you, Rob, of course.
Yeah.
A lot to be said there.
You hold us all together.
You guys are amazing. You really are. I mean, kudos to you. Going through things like that, a lot of people really, really want to join an investigative team and investigate what's on the other side. Some people only get past the first investigation and they're either bored and they say this is a lot of malarkey, or they get terrified and are like, nope, it's not for me. But for someone to keep doing it, like, kudos to you guys. And you do have how many in the team, Margaret?
There's 10 of us.
Yeah, that's a good amount.
Of course, I think we've reduced a couple. So we might be like 8 now.
And we still do, and Kat, I do want to mention that although I am now living in a different state, we have already worked together on a couple of different cases remotely.
Nice.
So it doesn't matter where you are when it comes to being a medium, because Troy and I can tune into the same energies from wherever we are, as long as one of us is there.
That's been a real interesting experience. One time, when I used to live in Washington, D.C., we had an investigation, a remote investigation. They called me, and I was on the phone, and I just got away from the house. I was walking through one of the public parks in D.C., or trees, and all of it. And I remember looking around, because once I connected and realized we could do this remotely, I'm talking and I'm in the zone. And after about 20 minutes, I remember just stopping and realizing where I was and looking around to see if anybody had been watching me, because my arms are moving, I'm pointing to things, I'm walking. He's a person. And so from then on, I look at my surroundings if I'm going to do that anymore, and because it's just,
So Troy was in Washington, D.C. I was in Maryland, Annapolis, near Annapolis, and we were trying to help a girl with a paranormal with a ghost girl who was in Ocean City, New Jersey. So and that's what we did.
And I remember even in the park at one point, one of the girl ghosts showed up at the park, and there was a little bit of a crossing that went on there, and I remember being able to do that as we walked through it, and the entire park in my mind and everything just changed all around me as this whole experience began to happen, as if I were really right there in the building by itself. So connecting to the energy of it and being able to connect to people like this and in this team, it made it work no matter where you are. And that was a lesson for me. Realize you could do that. We thought we'd give it a
and it worked.
Well, we did a lot of remotes during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
I never even thought of doing that.
I mean, we couldn't investigate, but for the mediums to remotely go in and pick up whatever's going on, we could do that.
It usually helps if there's somebody on site with a phone, like the homeowner or whatever, and they're showing us or something, and that way it's easier for us to connect. But we did cross over a Native American earthbound ghost in the backyard of this home that was owned by 2 guys that kept pounding on the back door at like 3:00 in the morning. And that was during COVID, Kat, and we were all wearing masks. We were all outside, but we crossed this guy over in the backyard.
That was
So that was crazy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they never heard the knocking again at 3:00 in the morning. Never.
one of my favorite things to do now is the crossing over experience. Sometimes it's hard. It's not as easy. But a lot of times, by the end of the investigation and the story's been told, a lot of these energies and ghosts are ready to cross over. And what's really beautiful about it is when we open up that scene in the portal, and it's really beautiful when I can sense and see relatives from the other side peering through and ready to help that person cross over. And often all you have to do, because the person who you're crossing over is still a person. They're just, they're in ghost form, but they're still very much a human being. And you treat them with respect that way. And they're scared, like they don't know what's going to happen, and they're going to walk into some light, and they haven't done it in a while. A lot of them are afraid from the stories they've heard growing up, because that they might go to hell, or they might be punished forever, and that's why they're scared to cross over. But as soon as you open a portal and invite a relative or a trusted person who's passed on before them to meet with them or to help them through, the trust is there, and they go. And that's usually all it takes.
Or a pet.
Interesting.
Or a pet, yep.
Or a pet, yeah.
Well, before we sign off, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share, or and also tell the listeners where they can find you?
I think Margaret should go first.
Rob, you're the best at this. So for Inspired Ghost Tracking, right now the best place to find us is on Facebook. We have a page. You can like our page. We have a thought of the day, and you can always message us if you need a private investigation. We do local places. And if you need to email us, we're inspiredghost without the O at AOL.com.
And you don't charge for investigations, correct?
We do not charge for investigations.
Troy?
I just think what I love about this whole thing is, and even talking about it tonight, I love doing this, and it's a completion of like the giftings of who you are. It really is something that a lot of people may not realize they should pursue, but they're afraid. There's a lot of ghost stories and things you watch on TV, and the goofy ways people do investigations sometimes on TV, not all of them, but some of them are just nuts, where they're screaming at ghosts and trying to aggravate a spirit or an energy. And we never do that. As a matter of fact, when we have other people with us that are new time or first time investigators, or people going with us, we let them know the last thing you will ever do, and you will be asked to leave if you start yelling at a ghost and trying to aggravate them, antagonize something just to make a glass fly across the room or something. Because you would never go to someone's house and do that.
Exactly.
But anyway.
Do you really want to upset something that you can't see?
No. But the parting words of this is just, when you do this from a place of intent and love and healing, it's a whole different experience than if you go in there just trying to see if you can find something scary. This isn't like a Scooby-Doo investigation.
No.
It's a very serious thing, and you're dealing with real people and real energies, and whether you like it or not, it's very real. And you can really be of a service to help these people. Like if I saw somebody struggling on the side of the road or whatever, you'd help them. So why not help somebody who's also a ghost?
Well said. Rob?
People can find me through Margaret, of course. But they can also find me on robgutro.com or petspirits.com. So I have 3 series of books for people who are interested in all different aspects of the paranormal. Ghosts on a Medium's Vacation, which is history and travel and ghosts that I met. Ghosts and Spirits, which are earthbounds and those who have crossed over. And then Pets in the Afterlife, as you know, how pets communicate from the other side. So I just think that everybody needs to be treated with respect and love. And I find that nothing to fear crossing over, because there really is no bad place. It's about forgiveness and love and healing on the other side. So please don't stay earthbound as a ghost, because there's not enough of us to help you cross over, and you will be sorry. And that's the way I'll leave it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Oh, you were going to say something, Troy?
No, I was just going on with Rob. It's like you will eventually cross over anyway.
Oh,
so.
yeah. Well, thank you so very much. I'm really glad that we were able to finally get our schedules to work and get this done. I really thank you so much for being patient. I really enjoyed this conversation. I want to have you all on again another time if you're willing. And I really appreciate you all, and much love and light to you, all of you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to come back and maybe talk about the burned ghost, maybe, or
that'd be
steel workers ghost, or
Yeah.
the Maryland mansion that has like 7 different ghosts, including the tombstone that Troy drew on the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Or the ghostly attachment to a piece of jewelry that we both connected to before we got there. So.
Or the young woman at Belmont Mansion that showed me what she looked like, and then they went downstairs and somebody from the other part of the investigation brought the portrait out of her. Exactly.
Nice.
Described.
No names, Troy. No names.
Yeah, that's why I said Maryland mansion, Troy.
Maryland.
Right.
Work with me.
This is like a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for the next episode.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Have a great night. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.
All right.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.
Paranormal Heart Podcast.